The sun glimmers off the turquoise waters of the Caribbean, crashing against the golden sands of a tropical island. On any normal day, this paradise exudes serenity, with tourists basking under the warm sun and gentle waves lapping at the shore. But today, the roar of jet engines pierces the calm, growing louder as a passenger plane approaches. This is Princess Juliana International Airport in Sint Maarten, a site famous for its jaw-dropping low approaches, where aircraft pass just meters above the beach. Tourists and locals alike have long marveled at the audacity of pilots navigating this unique runway, hemmed in by hills to the east and the Caribbean Sea to the west. The beauty of the island belies its danger. Tropical weather can turn chaotic without warning, and pilots approaching this airport must contend with sudden storms, strong crosswinds, and unpredictable cloud cover. For one flight in particular, the stakes were about to become life or death. In 1970, the crew of a Douglas DC-9 faced exactly this challenge. They would circle, attempt landings repeatedly, and ultimately confront a grim reality that would test their training, resolve, and judgment. The story begins far from the Caribbean in New York City on May 2, 1970. At Kennedy Airport, travelers buzzed about, unaware that one particular aircraft would become the center of an extraordinary aviation tale. The plane, a Douglas DC-9-33 registered in 935F, was owned by Overseas National Airways, ONA. ONA, a New York-based charter airline founded in the 1940s, had extended its services to Caribbean routes, including a partnership with ALM Antillean Airlines, the Dutch Caribbean offshoot of KLM. ALM did not possess aircraft capable of flying non-stop to New York, so it relied on partnerships, chartering planes like this DC-9 for their long-haul flights. This DC-9, nicknamed the Carib Queen, was at the time a state-of-the-art regional jet, capable of long flights, but only just. Its range was at the limits for a non-stop trip to Sint Maarten, and while an auxiliary fuel tank was scheduled for installation to extend its endurance, it had not yet been completed. Even so, it was chosen for Flight 980, destined to ferry passengers from New York to Sint Maarten. ONA provided the pilots and plane, while ALM supplied the flight attendants, creating a hybrid crew for the journey. The cockpit was staffed by Captain Balcy DeWitt, 37, a seasoned aviator with over 12,000 hours of flight experience and a reputation as a tough, meticulous pilot examiner. His first officer, Harry Evans, 25, had 3,500 hours and had recently completed proficiency checks on the DC-9. Joining them was navigator Hugh Harton, 35, whose experience was largely on DC-8 tests. The navigator role, already becoming obsolete, was still part of the crew structure for this flight. Before departure, Captain DeWitt reviewed the fuel situation. A notice mandated that fuel remaining on arrival, BFA, should be at least 7,000 alms, providing an estimated flying time of 4 hours and 34 minutes, well above the minimum requirement. Under the influence of a low-pressure system, bringing thunderstorms, heavy rain, and gusty winds. As the plane approached Sint Maarten, visibility deteriorated, and conditions below minimums forced the crew to make critical decisions. The DC-9's cruise adjustments inadvertently worsened their fuel efficiency. Originally flying at flight level 290 to 29,000 feet, at Mach 78, Captain DeWitt requested a descent to flight level 270 and then 250 to avoid turbulence, reducing speed to Mach 72. Lower altitude increased air density and drag, forcing the engines to work harder and consume fuel at a higher rate. By this point, calculations showed they would arrive with 6,000 alps remaining, already below the minimum EFA. Yet the greater danger was not merely fuel, it was the crew's response to weather and the persistent drive to complete the flight. As Flight 908 descended towards Sint Maarten, the San Juan Air Route Traffic Control Center warned that weather conditions had fallen below safe minimums. Low visibility and cloud ceilings would make a landing hazardous. They executed a missed approach and circled to attempt the second landing, again failing to align properly with the runway. The third attempt finally aligned the plane, but it was still unstable, too high and too fast. After 11 minutes of landing attempts, the remaining fuel was down to 2,200 logs, giving them roughly 20 minutes of flight time, barely enough to reach their nearest alternate airport in St. Thomas, still over 100 miles away. Fuel readings became erratic, displaying momentary lows of 850 logs due to sloshing in nearly empty tanks. The crew faced a stark reality. Continuing to climb would consume more fuel, yet staying low left them dangerously short of any airport. At 3,500 feet, Captain DeWitt made the difficult decision. A water ditching might be the only option left. Communication with the cabin was hampered by an inoperative cockpit public address PA system, a seemingly minor fault with serious consequences. The captain could only signal the purser, Wilfred Spencer, who then relayed instructions to the flight attendants and passengers. Confusion reigned. Some passengers struggled with life vests, others were paralyzed by fear. The crew worked frantically, preparing life rafts and instructing passengers as best as possible under the stormy, chaotic conditions. Meanwhile, Captain DeWitt carefully maneuvered the DC-9 for a controlled ditching. Flying just 500 feet above the sea, he aligned the plane parallel to the waves, easing the descent as engines began flaming out due to fuel exhaustion. Emergency power systems kicked in, but the plane now functioned as a glider, moving inexorably toward the ocean. Flight attendants in the navigator positioned life rafts and instructed passengers, aware that the coming seconds would determine survival. At 100 feet above the waves, the plane's engine sputtered. The captain extended flaps to the emergency maximum of 50 degrees, generating lift while slowing the plane below 100 knots. Then, with a soundless, horrifying inevitability, ALM Flight 980 hit the water. The impact tilted the plane at 45 degrees, jarring passengers violently. Many were thrown from seats, struck by unsecured objects or other passengers. Seatbelts, made of fabric to metal connectors, failed under the tremendous deceleration. The cabin was the scene of chaos. Panic, injuries, and fear abounded, yet the plane remained largely intact, bobbing in the stormy sea. Captain DeWitt and First Officer Evans quickly assessed their situation. Water was entering the fuselage, and survival depended on rapid evacuation. Flight attendants continued guiding passengers, inflating life vests, and preparing rafts. Tragically, some passengers, particularly two small children, did not survive the initial ditching. Despite this, many were able to enter the water safely, clinging to life vests and rafts amidst the waves. The aftermath of the incident would prompt investigations into aviation safety. It highlighted the critical importance of fuel management, crew decision-making, and emergency preparedness. The accident emphasized the risks inherent in operating close to performance limits, particularly in challenging weather conditions and with complex crew dynamics. Today, lessons learned from ALM Flight 980 inform pilot training, emergency procedures, and aircraft design, ensuring that such an extraordinary scenario remains a rare exception in aviation history. The story of Flight 980 is a testament to the razor-thin margins pilots operate within and the extraordinary challenges of aviation. It is a reminder that behind every routine flight lies a complex web of decisions, risks, and human judgment. On that stormy Caribbean day, a combination of misjudged fuel, poor weather, and human decision-making led to one of the most remarkable water landings in commercial aviation history, a story of chaos, courage, and the fragile line between disaster and survival.